Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Well, it had to happen. The WBO, which hasn't had a mandatory since 2017, has called its mandatory challenger to be fulfilled in the next 180 days. So see here on screen, so the WBO president, Paco Valcárcel, he says Clash on the Dunes is over. Now Clash of the Mandatories will be next. WBO mandatory challenger at Usyk within 180 days, and that is of course Oleksandr Uysk, who was named earlier this year, about mid-year, WBO mandatory courtesy of his super champion status, which he had at cruiserweight, cleaning up all the belts and being awarded the super champion status, which allowed him to claim the WBO mandatory. And apologies if you can hear something in the background here, it's absolutely teeming down, so we'll keep going. I can't do anything about the weather, it is torrential. But anyway, this is going to cause a bit of a situation because the IBF has already said Kubrat Pulev must have his shot before the end of May 2020. And see here on screen, so he tweeted congratulations to Joshua saying, "I want to congratulate AJ and Eddie on regaining the title and look forward to facing AJ in his next bout, as the IBF has ordered. The result is going to be different this time, I guarantee it." Not sure what the result will be different this time refers to, because they haven't fought before. Maybe of Pulev's 2017 pullout, I don't know. But Kubrat Pulev has to have his shot before the end of May. And now the WBO has called its mandatory Oleksandr Uysk and given 6 months essentially for that to be fulfilled. So that's effectively, what are we now, December? It has to happen by about May. So now you have a game of potentially cat and mouse. What do they actually do? Because this could force a situation where Joshua has to drop a belt, either the IBF or the WBO. Maybe there is the option for some wrangling with the sanctioning bodies to have one before the other. But who knows, because it's been a long time since the IBF was fulfilled. That was Carlos Takam, that was Anthony Joshua back in 2017, and the WBO was Joseph Parker versus Hughie Fury. That was around the same time, September of that year. So it's been a long time between drinks, a couple of years without a mandatory, and they want them to actually happen. They've had a lot of leeway this year, no mandatories in 2019, and there was just the one in 2018 with Alexander Povetkin, the WBA. And even that is starting to become a length of time, so no doubt at some point next year the WBA will also call its mandatory, adding to the complexity of holding on to 3 titles. Joshua has always had mandatories piling up, and now the rubber may hit the road, but I guess you have to look at the situation and say, what sort of leeway is there? But I guess you have to look at the situation and go, what sort of leeway would exist? Can they convince Oleksandr Uysk, who was also promoted by Matchroom, co-promoted by Matchroom, can they convince him to actually step aside, be paid a chunk of money or whatever, and have his mandatory fulfilled later in the year? You'd imagine if they want to keep all 3 belts together, that would be the ideal situation. And I say that because if Anthony Joshua decided to take the WBO, he's more than likely to be stripped of the IBF, which has to happen by the end of May. And then that sort of falls out of Matchroom's control. And the WBO at the moment, with Oleksandr Uysk being promoted by them, if they drop that, it stays within that stable. And potentially it could be Uysk versus another Matchroom fighter in Joseph Parker, who's currently number 4 in the rankings. And his promoter at the WBO annual convention, David Higgins, or should I say his ex-promoter but current advisor/manager, has tried to lobby for Parker to be put up even higher at number 3, which may actually happen given now Joshua has regained his title. So Joshua was at number 3 behind Tyson Fury and obviously behind Oleksandr Uysk. Where Andy Ruiz Jr. will fall to in the WBO rankings, unclear, but probably lower than 3rd spot. So Parker may actually climb higher on the basis of Joshua coming up and Ruiz going down. So if they do manage to work something out, then obviously there's no issue. But if one of the belts is dropped, my pick would be the WBO, just because it would stay in-house with the Matchroom side of things. And I know that there's been grumblings from some boxing fans worried about titles being held up in different sort of promotional stables. And that has sort of been an ongoing concern, obviously, with Deontay Wilder and the PBC, fighting guys within the PBC type stable for the most part. And Anthony Joshua, he hasn't necessarily fought too many guys within the promotional stable at the time he fought them, but a lot of the guys he has faced have ended up joining the Matchroom stable, like Joseph Parker, for example, who wasn't connected with Matchroom at the time he fought Joshua. But, who knows where things will go with all this, but it is interesting times with the WBO really dropping this in immediately after the fight and potentially forcing a situation where a belt may need to be dropped. We shall see what happens, what wrangling may or may not take place, and if it is the IBF that is dropped, and that would surprise me, that would become a vacant belt, and that would be Kubrat Pulev versus the next highest contender. And that at the moment is Adam Kovnatsky. He is in the PBC stable, so I wouldn't mind that fight. That could happen, but at the moment I would favour Anthony Joshua deciding to face Kubrat Pulev first, and then if he wins that, facing Oleksandr Uysk. Or if the situation is Usyk fights for a vacant title, maybe there would end up being some sort of unification towards the end of 2020. Where this leaves undisputed, unclear, because if Anthony Joshua, and I know people will say unifications trump mandatories, not if it's already been ordered, and the IBF came in well ahead of this rematch and said, look, Pulev has to have his shot. So if Joshua automatically went to face Deontay Wilder right now, for example, likely he would not have one of his belts or both those WBO and IBF. It just is how it is at this point. But because Wilder has Fury lined up for February, it was never going to happen next anyway. If it is going to happen, who knows when it will happen, but probably not next year. I think that's just the reality of the situation and how the chips have fallen, especially with these mandatories being in the way. What do you make of it all? What do you think will happen? Will they sort out some sort of deal to keep the belts together, or will one of them be dropped? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.